In this video, I'm going to show you how to get rid of all sales objections forever. Yes, really. All right, so let's get into it. Hi, my name is AJ. I work in B2B consulting and lead generation. And so a lot of what we do is we support people with how to close new deals. And we've done this, or I've done this over 15 years. We've worked with hundreds of clients at this point and supported all types of businesses, solopreneurs, all the way up to multi-million, billion-dollar enterprises. Actually, we've consulted on leadership and everything in between. So this will work for you, and I'm going to kind of go through how you can eliminate objections so that you can close more deals, you can have a more predictable income, and you can emotionally prepare and do better on your sales calls and have not so much stress around it. Okay, so let's get into it. So why is it important? Why is it important to do this? Well, the first and easiest one is so that you get more clients, which gets you more deals, which makes you more money. Okay. The second reason this is important is because it makes your earning, both business revenue, but also your personal income, a little bit more predictable. Okay. And then the third thing is so that you're never caught off guard. One of the things I've noticed over our even daily of supporting consultants with their sales is sometimes they don't know what to expect because they've never done lead generation or business development. All of their clients have come from referral or from their mom's cousin or people in their network. They've never really had to sell. So when they are getting objections, they're kind of off put. So we don't want you to be off put. We want you to be ready emotionally and know how to handle it because that's really more than half of it. Okay. So what is an objection? And maybe we should start with what isn't it? It's not a no, usually. So when people object to you and they say, well, I have XYZ reason, I need to think about it. It's too expensive. I need to ask a partner, which we're going to get into how to address all these in a second. It doesn't actually mean no, usually in a small percentage of cases. It is their way of saying no. They don't know how to say no, and that's okay. But more often than not, it is exactly what it is said to be. It's just an objection. It's a question that they have. It's a concern that has not been addressed yet. And so what you shouldn't do is be reactive and think, oh no, they have a question about my service. I guess they're not going to hire me. It's actually more often than not the opposite, that they want to move forward, but they have a couple of open things that they need to kind of be mentally checked for them to decide to hire you and move forward. Okay, so that's the one thing I want to make sure is clear about an objection, is that an objection is not a no. It's an opportunity for you to have addressed a concern that hasn't been addressed yet. So in the rest of this video, I'm going to go over the most common objections and how you can actually crush these objections before they ever come up. Okay, so we call this the easy yes process. And I learned this in my 15 years of sales, probably 6 or 7 years ago, actually. Before that, it was a lot of the advice of make their dream really big and dig into their pain and then offer fast action discounts and things like that. And all those things can work, but sometimes they don't work super well when you're working with a more sophisticated client. And it kind of feels icky. Let's be real. Telling people, don't you want your kids to be proud of me on a sales call is pretty cringe and horrible, I think. So the easy yes process is the process we developed that kind of does three main things. The first thing is, and the person who taught it to me, they would always say, we want to squash monsters when they're small, right? We want to crush them when they're little. And that means we want to crush these objections before you get to the end of your sales call. Right? You want to get to the end of your sales call and you say, hey, do you have any questions? And they say, how much is it? That should be really the only question. How can I start? Right? Those should be the next questions. And that only happens when you eliminate all the objections before you get to the end. And so that's what our goal is. And that's what I'm going to be showing you how to do. And you don't need to pressure people, which is great. You don't need to manipulate people, which is great. You're just demonstrating your value and getting to an easy yes or an easy no. Okay, so let's get into some actual use cases and how you can implement this in your business. But one of the important things to think about is even if I don't cover what your specific objection is, it can usually be built into your sales process so that you eliminate all of these. Okay, so let's get into it. So the first one, I need a reference or a referral, right? So what does this actually mean when somebody says they need a reference or referral? Sometimes it means they've been burned in the past, right? Sometimes it means they're not convinced by you or your solution. Sometimes they think it's not going to work for them. Like you've said nice things, they're not sure it's going to work. They need references or referrals. Okay. So those are typically some of the bigger reasons why people would ask for a reference or referral. So how do you squish that monster when it's small? And in our experience, or in my experience, what I've typically seen is you offer either testimonials, right? So one of the most powerful things you can do is just scatter testimonials in your sales conversations or all over your social media and your website, wherever it is, so that people are like, oh, okay, well, here's 20 people who said that this worked for them and that they like working with this person. I guess this works, right? If you don't have testimonials, which is a question I got the other day on my YouTube, which is this, I guess. So here, I had somebody say, well, what if you don't have a bunch of testimonials? Well, then you can offer either like a guarantee or an assurance. It does a little bit scream newbie, but like, if that's all you got, like we all start somewhere. So, one of the things you could do is offer like a money back guarantee or something like that. Like, hey, if it doesn't work, I'll work with you for free, or I'll give you your money back or a refund or whatever makes the most sense for your business. I don't think that should be the first place you go, but that's something you could offer. Something that I've seen even bigger businesses do and that we do is we have like a 30-day love it or leave it, right? And so the 30-day love it or leave it guarantee is like, look, try us out, make sure you really like our team, our process, the whole thing. And if you do, and if you don't, for whatever reason, you can cancel and get your money back, right? And that allows us to evaluate them as well. So that's kind of a two-way, okay? The other thing is you can offer assurances, which is a little different than a guarantee. It's almost the same, but it's different. And so for us, it's like, we guarantee your campaign will be live in 14 days. If not, we start refunding you. We guarantee a 24-hour response time. So having addressed all the things that they may be concerned about could help remove the I need a reference for your solution request. Now, you might still get them. And honestly, like what I've kind of done is say, like, look, if and when you became a client, you probably wouldn't want to be bothered by 10 people every month who are like thinking about hiring us, right? And they're like, no, I wouldn't want to do that, right? And if they do, that's another issue. And so I'm not going to bother my clients to talk to people who aren't super convinced about the solution. Like we have assurances, we have guarantees, and we have dozens of case studies and testimonials. What about this doesn't feel right? And if it's just your gut, maybe listen to that. Like if your gut's telling you to not press forward, I don't think you should. Right. And that's not you, again, being manipulative. That's just you being candid with people. So that's the need for a reference or referral way to address that objection. Now let's get into the next one. I need to think about it. I need to think about it as one that comes up very often, and that a lot of new salespeople will be like, okay, you think about it and you come back to me. There's kind of two things that typically I need to think about it means. If they're not even willing to give you like a verbal yes, right? They're not signing a contract. They're not paying for anything. If they're not willing to say yes to you, just with their words, it's probably that they're not convinced by your solution. For whatever reason, whatever you've showed them is not convincing or compelling to them. So like one of the things we do, and that I would advise you do on your sales calls, is you ask that as a question. And so I will, as we demo our solution for people and we just show people everything, which I know not a lot of people do or like to do. I think it's actually a great thing, but that's a different video. Is I will ask them, is there any reason you could see this not working for you on our actual sales conversation once I've demoed the solution? Because then if they have a concern about it, they'll tell me then, oh yeah, I'm worried because I don't use LinkedIn that much. Oh, okay, let me address that concern, right? I have a client who doesn't use LinkedIn that much, or I didn't use LinkedIn that much, and this is working for us, right? Or it may be that they have, I have a question about like, will I get to control this, or can I approve the things that go out, right? And these are just actual use cases from us in the day-to-day. So if they say I need to think about it, it's probably that they have not verbally or internally thought this will work for me. And so they're actually probably thinking it's a no. right? So sometimes people have a hard time saying no to your face, especially if you're a business owner. They don't want to like poo poo on your dreams, right? So they're just like, I need to think about it. And then they like are kind of let off the hook. So I would, as best as possible, say, hey, look, if you're not convinced by this, like, yes or no is totally cool. I would just love the clarity because I only have so many hours in a day. And if you're a no, I don't want to actually like meet with you every month for the rest of forever and bother you really. And I don't think you want that either, right? So that's how I would address that. I need to think about it. A more aggressive salesperson could even go as quickly as like, well, what's there to think about? I don't necessarily do that, but it can work for some people if that's kind of your style. And just ask them like, well, what are you thinking about? Like what's happening? And they're just like, well, I just don't know if this is like worth it money wise, or I don't know if I have the time. You're like, okay. And then now you have the things that you need to make sure are addressed in your sales conversation next time, right? So you might ask for a time commitment. You might say, hey, we're going to ask you for 30 minutes a week for the first 3 weeks. Can you commit to that time? Yes. Great. Now you've addressed that before you've revealed your price or your offer more formally. So just addressing these, and again, squishing the monsters when they're small is going to make your sales conversations a lot easier. Okay. So that's how I would address the I need to think about it concern, is that there's something that they're not convinced by, and you need to get their confirmation that they think this will work for them before you even get to your pricing. Okay. Next objection. It's too expensive. Okay. So if it's too expensive, or they say it's too expensive, what that actually means is that they don't see the ROI or the value, or they don't think it's going to work. But more often than not, I think it's they don't see the ROI or value. So one of the best things you can do is demonstrate to them, like, look, if your offer is worth $10,000 and we are going to get you 2 clients per quarter, that would be worth $20,000 per quarter. That would be worth $80,000 per year. Does that feel reasonable? Like, this is how we're going to drive them. And so we actually show them, like, we send this many connections, this many people respond. And we just show them in live client accounts, right? And they're able to see, oh, yeah, I could see how I would make $20,000 or $80,000 or whatever it is, right? And get them to agree that there is an ROI attached to what you're doing and that there's a monetary objective value. Now, that's more if you're like in the straight up business space, like offering something that is going to increase their money. Some of you guys are selling services that don't directly support money. I think sometimes they indirectly do, and that's something worth paying attention to. So like, I have a client who's a social media manager, and she's like, well, my social media management doesn't like drive direct money. It's indirect money. And I'm like, okay, but like if you're creating X amount of pieces of content, right? And they get this many views, and this is how much it would cost to run paid ads to it versus doing organic content. This is how much your content is worth every month. It's worth $5,000 a month in awareness. Okay. Plus, you're taking the time off their plate to actually do all the work for them. If it would take them 20 hours a month and their time's worth $100 an hour, that's another $2,000, right? So those are different ways that you can help demonstrate ROI or value. So like you can do just straight money if you're in that kind of industry, some sort of consulting or marketing or something, right? You can also do time. You can say, look, what's your time worth? Your time is worth this much. You're spending how much time on this every week? Okay, so you're wasting $8,000 of your time every month on this. Or you could hire our firm and we can do it for $2,000 per month. And we'll do it better, right? What do you want to do? And so now it becomes a very easy to see ROI. And again, you want them to agree. Okay. So money, time are the major two. The third one that you could do is also like happiness or satisfaction, fulfillment, whatever word you want to use. Those are kind of like the big 3 things you want to focus on when you are marketing and when you are selling and trying to compel people to invest in your services. It could be happiness, right? So maybe you offer virtual assistant placement services, right? And right now, a business owner is doing all this admin task and it's making them miserable and sad and depressed. If you place a virtual assistant in their business who could take 80% of that away from them, they're going to be how much happier, how much more relaxed. And then again, it kind of ties to time. And if they have extra time, are they going to use that time to make more money, right? So it's a little bit of all of them, but you're going to lead with one. So And if you're watching this, by the way, and you're like in a B2C space, happiness might be where you like are focused, right? I used to own gyms and wellness centers, and oftentimes people came to us and they're like, I want to lose weight. And we're like, well, why do you want to lose weight? Right? And they're like, well, because I want to be able to run around with my kids, and that's going to make me fulfilled. And I also want to live longer, right? Which is happiness and time, kind of in a different way. And so just getting to how you're going to support them and getting them to say, oh, for me, my happiness is worth everything, right? Or my kids' happiness is worth everything, or my business happiness is worth everything, right? You're spending 40 to 60 hours a week working in your business every single week. You want to be happy as possible while doing that. So that's what I would say for the too expensive, is that you want to demonstrate your ROI and really go into it meticulously. Okay, need to ask my partner. Now, partner in this instance is like a romantic or life partner, right? So in this instance, where the goof up happened is that you didn't actually have the decision maker on the call. So like I would typically start most of these calls like, hey, are all decision makers here? Is this like your business? Is this like, do you run it with a business partner or a life partner or something like that? Should they be here? Just because I found it's more helpful if we have all decision makers on the call, so that I don't have to do this twice, right? That's just a quick, easy like way to get rid of that in the beginning. More often than not, people say, no, it's my business or I make the decisions, right? If people still want to ask their partner, I think that's totally fine and reasonable to do. But I would also get them to still try to say a verbal yes, right? Like, because if it's their business and they're just going to ask their wife or husband because they want to, get their input, well, that's reasonable. One of the things I typically would say is like, well, what do you think they're going to say? Right? What would they respond to on this? And more often than not, they'll say something like, oh, I think they're going to say it's a great idea. You're like, okay, cool. You can still get the verbal yes. I typically would. I know that's a little bit aggressive, or you can schedule like a decision call from that instance if somebody needs to ask a partner. Because I don't think it's unreasonable, especially if you have when you're working with small businesses, especially, like every decision is like kind of life or death in their mind, right? So I think I get it if they want to go talk to a partner. But more often than not, I would try to have all people who are going to actually make the decision on the call. So if you find you're getting like, I need to ask my wife or husband a lot, I would like in the beginning of your sales call, say, cool, let's reschedule with them here because I want to make sure any of their questions are addressed. And if they think of something you don't think of, and I don't, it's going to take multiple steps, I'd rather just be able to answer it straight away. Okay. But yeah, those are kind of the like options I would say with that. Sometimes it's totally normal for people to be like, I'm just going to run it by my wife or husband. Sometimes it's people who are like, they're actually not in charge, and you want to make sure you're not wasting your energy and time, and also wasting their time. Cool. So that's how I would address that. I need to ask a partner. I'm interviewing other companies. Okay, so this is an objection that comes up if you're in a competitive space. Good news about being in a competitive space, it means people are buying what you sell. That's great. The bad side is interviewing other companies, right? And so what this typically means is it can mean a couple things, right? It can mean they're not compelled by what you're selling, or they're looking for like, what's the best value, right? What's cheapest is another normal way to say that. It's like, what's the cheapest that I can get the most for, right? And I think if somebody wants to interview other companies, that's cool. One of the things you might want to address on your sales call is what the difference between you and another company is. So whether you have a unique methodology where you can't be compared to other companies. I also like the idea or the practice of putting three, like saying like, hey, companies you typically sell on one of these three things. They're either very high quality, they're very fast, or they're very cheap. Some companies, some very rare, are two of those things. None of those companies are all three of those things. Those three, the ones that are all three are Bigfoot. They don't exist. You can't find it. You hear about them, but they don't exist. Okay. It was actually a gorilla the whole time, right? So what I would say is, what are of these three? Is it more important that it's high quality and done fast, high quality and done cheap, or cheap and fast? Because we do fast and high quality, but we don't do cheap. right? And what I like about doing that is then you're now communicating to them like, look, what do you care about? And if it is the cheapest and you're not the cheapest and you're not selling on cheap, you can end your call. Like it's saved you 40 more minutes, right? Because if they're just looking for literally the cheapest thing there is, well, unless you're in the industry of doing high volume, cheap stuff, that's not you, right? And so for us, we've always sold on value. We're high quality, we do a good job, and we do it very fast and predictably on time, right? And so most people will say, no, I want it high quality and I want it fast, right? I don't want it to take forever. I don't want it to be bad quality, right? They want it to be those. Typically, they'll say those two are other things. I'm like, okay, cool, because that's what we do, right? So that's what I would say. And then the other thing too is like you could say, cool, yeah, feel free to go, look around, and why don't we have a follow up in a week? I think that's okay sometimes. Again, if you're confident in what you're doing. Ways you can stop that though is like you can even just ask people straight up, like, what would I have need to show you for you to not go checking out other girls, right? Like effectively, right? If it's the dating world, you're on a really good date here. What would need to have happened on this call for you to say, you know what, I'm going to cancel my other date? And if they're like, nothing, I'm just nervous, so I'm going to date a million people. I'm going to court a bunch of companies and see which one makes the most sense. Okay. When do you want to make your decision by? Is this actually in the running or what's up? And then determine if you should do a follow-up call where you can get a decision. I think that's totally fine to do, by the way. Like we get a lot of people who go interview other companies and they come back and they realize most people are either they happen to be more expensive with less value, or they're so cheap, but they do a shitty job, right? And so I'm okay with that. You gotta figure out what, works the best for you. How do I know this will work for me? We've kind of been talking about it this whole time. That's an objection that people will get. What happens if it doesn't work? You got to get them to agree that this will work for them before you even get to your to your pricing. Like you just got to get them to agree. That's just what it is. So whether it's showing them or explaining the strategy and getting them to see, like, you see how this works. Do you think this would work for you? And then you get them to admit it. This addresses if they have questions or concerns earlier, and then you're in control of it versus it happening at the end. Because if you have all these little objections that are living in the back of people's brain by the end of their call, these are the monsters that are going to grow and grow and grow and grow. And those concerns just grow for these people. And if you don't address them, they're going to be cranky, right? So I would, and they're not going to convert, which is the thing that matters more, right? So I would say, get them an admission that this will work for them. I feel like this is a little redundant, but I think it's important. Do you have a guarantee? So you kind of have two choices with this. You can either just have one if you're new in the space or you don't have a lot of experience. I would just say have one, right? It can be a money back guarantee. It can be a 30-day love it or leave it, or it could be like a we'll work for you for free until this works type guarantee. The other thing you could do is you could say, no, we don't have a guarantee because we know what we're doing. When you go to the doctor, I hope you don't ask them if they have a guarantee for their work. I've been doing this XYZ. I have this many testimonials. I'm going to do the work. I'm going to do a good job. We just don't offer guarantees because we don't need to, respectfully. That's like the more like if you have experience and you've had lots of case studies and you know what you're doing, you can kind of come and approach a little bit more like that. It's really up to your discernment. I think it's, again, if you're in a highly competitive space, it's more easy to just have one. If you're confident in what you're doing, just don't make it insane where you're going to lose money on working with somebody or lose a drastic amount of money, or you don't want to make sure people are exploiting you as well. So yeah, that's what I would say to people who do you have a guarantee. And then the last objection, which actually doesn't sound like an objection, but I'm going to say for small businesses, it is an objection, is can you send me a proposal? Now, I know that actually sounds really great, right? Send me a proposal. It's like, oh my God, they want to hire me. If you're a small business owner and you're charging less than $30,000 for your services, people who are asking you for a proposal don't actually, more often than not, want to hire you. What they want to do is they want to dance, pretend they're going to hire you. They feel bad saying no. And so they're asking for a proposal, and then it gets them off the call. I would tell you to not send a proposal. I know that sounds crazy. The only slight exception is if you're like a design firm or a creative firm, like who leans heavy on that. But I typically wouldn't advise sending a proposal. I would just send an agreement. And the reason why is because unless your deal size is massive or you're working with like enterprise level clients, they don't actually need a proposal to say yes or no. And so what's often happening is they're just like, oh, I'm courting you, and they're not actually interested in pressing forward. So I would advise not doing it. We're, you know, we've sold hundreds of people into our different small business offerings. I can't tell you if a proposal has ever resulted in a closed one. I don't know if it's if it has, it's so small that it's not worth it. Now, if you're selling enterprise or even mid market, of course you're going to do a proposal. But I would say for the small businesses, doing a proposal is not a good call. Okay, so those are a bunch of objections that you're going to get on sales calls. Those are how to overcome a good chunk of them. If I missed one, tell me down below. I'll probably address it and answer it for you. I hope you found this helpful and you're able to implement this in your sales process. If and when you do, you're going to see you're going to close more people. You're going to be able to do it without manipulating and being high pressure with people, pushy with people, and it's going to be very easy. So I hope you found this helpful. If you did, subscribe, follow, click all the buttons, and I will see you next time. Bye.